Thank you very much, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, it is so cool to be mayor of a city that not only promotes itself as smart, but also has the third-party validation to prove it. We walk the walk, we talk the talk. A couple of shout-outs this afternoon. One is to Go Fred, to the entire team for thinking outside the box. Just an amazing job our staff have done in putting this package together. Secondly, a little shout out here to Leo Hayes High. I got to tell you, when I was here this morning and I saw all the young people, I found that to be very refreshing because, it's nice to share amongst our peers and ourselves, but it's so nice to involve young people who will be the ones that are coming up through the ranks, and who's to know out of the young people that are here today that could be inspired, could be motivated to get into the field that a lot of you are in and make a difference in our community and keep employment here for young people in the future. It's all good. My pleasure now to put on my glasses. I want to do an introduction of Ray Kurzweil. He's been described as the restless genius by the Wall Street Journal, the ultimate thinking machine by Forbes. Inc. magazine ranked him number 8 among entrepreneurs in the United States, calling him the rightful heir to Thomas Edison. PBS included Ray as one of 16 revolutionaries who made America, along with other inventors of the past 2 centuries. As one of the leading inventors of our time, Ray was the principal developer of the first CCD flatbed scanner, the first OmniFont optical character recognition, the first print-to-speech reading machine for the blind, the first text-to-speech synthesizer, the first music synthesizer capable of recreating the grand piano and other orchestral instruments, and the first commercially marketed large vocabulary speech recognition. Among Ray's many honors, he is the recipient of the $500,000 MIT Lemelson Prize, the world's largest for innovation. In 1999, he received the National Medal of Technology, the nation's highest honor in technology, from President Bill Clinton in a White House ceremony. In 2002, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, established by the U.S. Patent Office. As a matter of fact, he has 26 patents himself. He has received 19 honorary doctorates and honors from 3 U.S. presidents. I feel so inadequate. Ray, I've only got 1. He's written 4 national best-selling books. The Age of Spiritual Machines has been translated into 9 languages and was the #1 best-selling book on Amazon in science. Ray's latest book, The Singularity is Near, was a New York Times bestseller, has been the #1 book on Amazon in both science and philosophy. Off the notes, what I was impressed when he was just starting out, he said to his friend, he said, "It is my goal to see that the blind can see, that the deaf can hear, and the lame can walk." Now that's a big, big thing to take on. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has not only taken it on, he has done it. We have a short video. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in our time zone, my pleasure, my honor to introduce the man, Mr. Ray Kurzweil.
Ray, thanks, man. Well, it's great to be in your time zone and in a city that combines a beautiful rustic outdoors with a passion for the future. It wasn't so long ago that a few 20-year-olds launched the Egyptian Revolution, launched Facebook itself, launched Google in a late-night dorm room challenge. The tools of changing the world are in everybody's hands. Facebook would start, if you saw the movie, was started with $19,000 of capital, which basically bought a few notebook computers. The future's going to change quite dramatically within the time frame of a typical project. It's like skeet shooting. You can't shoot where the target is. You've got to shoot ahead of the target, and the targets are moving faster and faster. Just think back 3 or 4 years ago. People didn't use social networks, wikis, blogs. 10 years ago, most people didn't use search engines. That really sounds like ancient history, but that was not so long ago. But it turns out that a certain aspect of the future is predictable, belying the common wisdom that you can't predict the future. And that's the essence of what I'd like to take you through. I started to think about the fact that to be really successful as an inventor, it wasn't enough to just get your gadgets to work. In fact, now that we do this early stage investing, I would say 95% of these teams do get their gadgets to work. They build exactly what they claim they will build if they're given the resources. But 95% of those projects will fail because the timing is wrong. They're not in the right place at the right time. Larry Page and Sergey Brin were in exactly the right place at the right time with this idea about reverse engineering the links on the internet. And so I began to contemplate, is there some way to anticipate where technology will be? So your project makes sense when you finish this 3 or 4 year development process, rather than aiming at the world that you see in front of you when you begin. And I really didn't expect to find very much, but I thought maybe if I gathered enough data and kind of squinted at it in a certain way, I could maybe make some educated guesses. And I made a very surprising discovery. One aspect of the future turns out to be remarkably predictable. And if you take the basic measures of the power of information technology, and there are many of them, the power of computers per dollar, per constant dollar, they follow exquisitely predictable trajectories. In the case of computation, and that was the first one I did, and I'll show you that in a minute, it went back to the 1890 census. And people say, oh, Moore's Law. There's nothing, well, Moore's Law was a piece of it that in 1981 that had only been going on for about maybe 15 years. This phenomena goes back decades before Gordon Moore was even born. It went through many different paradigms of technology. It's a basic law, I call it the law of accelerating returns, that pertains to information technology. The reason for it is we always use the latest technology to create the next. We always use the latest computers to create the next computers, and so it's an iterative process that builds on itself in a But I'm walking around with outdated software in my body that evolved thousands, in some cases millions of years ago. For example, my fat insulin receptor gene says hold on to every calorie because the next hunting season may not work out so well. And that was a very good idea 1,000 years ago. We worked all day to get a few calories. There was no refrigerators, so we stored them in the fat cells of our body. Today, that underlies an epidemic of obesity, and we don't need to do that anymore. I'd like to tell my fat insulin receptor gene, I'm confident the next hunting season will be good. You don't need to store every calorie anymore. That was actually tried near where I live at the Joslin Diabetes Center. I know these scientists quite well, and I followed this particular experiment, and they turned off that gene. We have a number of ways of doing that. RNA interference can turn genes off by sending in little pieces of messenger RNA that latch onto the RNA expressing a gene and destroy it, therefore turning off that gene. And these animals ate ravenously and remained slim, and it wasn't a fake slimness. They didn't get diabetes, they didn't get heart disease. They lived 20% longer. They got the benefits of caloric restriction while doing the opposite. And they're working now with a drug company to bring that to the human market. The point is that health and medicine is now an information technology, whereas before it was hit or miss. Hit or miss technologies are linear. Information technologies progress in an exponential manner. These various examples I gave you are in an early stage, but these technologies will be 1,000 times more powerful in 10 years. That's the implication of their doubling in power every year, which is what they're doing. They'll be 1,000,000 times more powerful in 20 years. And within 20 years, it'll be, in fact, within 15 years, we'll be adding more than a year every year to your remaining life expectancy. The world of physical things is becoming an information technology. So already, if I want to send you a movie or a recorded album or a book, a few years ago, I would have sent you a Federal Express package. Today, I can send you an email attachment, and you can turn it into a book or a movie or a sound recording. But what about other physical things? I can actually send you now an email attachment that you can turn into a violin, and I'll show you a picture of it, if you happen to have a three-dimensional printer. And three-dimensional printers are one of these technologies where it's just before the point where it really is going to revolutionize, say, the world of manufacturing and the world of physical things. And so people kind of ignore it, but it's very clear where it's going. It used to cost tens of thousands of dollars per three-dimensional printer. Now it's thousands of dollars. 5 to 10 years from now, it'll be hundreds of dollars, just the way we saw. In this ebook space, for example, ebooks were a fringe phenomena that nobody took seriously, and there were almost no books in it just a couple years ago. Now it's half of all the books, and it's projected to be 90% within a few years. So the world is changing faster and faster. If I take 30 steps linearly, that is our intuition about the future. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I get to 30. If I take 30 steps exponentially, that is the reality, not of everything, not of every trajectory, but of information technologies. They go 2, 4, 8, 16. At step 30, you are at 1 billion. And that's not an idle speculation about the future. As I mentioned, this phone is billions of times more powerful per constant dollar than the computer I used as an undergraduate. But just resisting the future and continuing to think about it in a linear manner is not a good option, because that's not going to reflect the way the future will roll out. In my view, it's one of the assumptions of this university we started, Singularity University. It is only the scale of these exponentially growing information technologies that have the potential to address the major challenges of humanity, like the environment and energy and poverty and disease. Conversely, there are new issues that are raised. Technology is a double-edged sword, and we need to be concerned with those as well. So this is what I wanted to cover today. Are there any questions on any of this? Okay, I'll step through it a little more slowly. It's just a very smooth trajectory that ignores all of history. You might wonder, how could this be? I mean, what is the fundamental thing we're measuring here? It's actually creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship and competition, because it's people coming up with some new way of doing computers, and it's true of all these different examples of these kinds of curves for information technology. There are thousands of innovations hidden in that graph. And it's also democratizing, as I mentioned, on the tools of creativity. So people have an idea, they can change the whole world. A 13-year-old can and is shaking the world of fashion and many other areas, are being influenced by anyone, young or old, regardless of their resources. A kid in Africa with a smartphone has access to more knowledge than the President of the United States did 15 years ago. If you look at the visceral reaction of actual examples of artificial intelligence in the world today, you can see we're making real progress. How many of you have heard of the IBM computer Watson that won the Jeopardy contest? I don't know if that's popular here in Canada. But that was actually very impressive. One of the predictions I made in the early 80s in my book, Age of Intelligent Machines, was a computer would take the World Chess Championship by '98. And I also predicted that when that happened, we would immediately dismiss chess as being a good example of human intelligence. And indeed, both of those things happened in '97. Deep Blue defeated Kasparov, and people immediately said, oh, well, that's not really significant. We always expected that would happen. Chess is kind of a logic game. Computers are logic machines. Obviously, they would do well at chess. What computers will never do is handle the ambiguities and vagaries and subtleties of human language. That is the essence of human intelligence. I actually agree with that. Alan Turing based his Turing test, which is a test to see if a machine is operating at human levels, based on language. And language does represent the complexity and subtlety of human thought. Well, so that's what's impressive about Watson, is it's actually dealing with pretty subtle forms of language that are completely unpredictable. If you look at these Jeopardy queries, they're filled with puns and jokes and metaphors and similes. They're very convoluted. They're not straightforward. It doesn't just ask, you know, who was a queen with blonde braids in the 16th century in Holland. It's got some very clever way of asking that. But what people don't realize is that not only was Watson able to deal with these convoluted forms of language in the Jeopardy query, but that knowledge, when it finally figured out, okay, what it's getting at is we need now a queen from Holland with blonde braids in the 16th century, that knowledge was not hand-coded by the scientists. Watson actually got that knowledge by sitting down, figuratively speaking, and reading all of Wikipedia, and also several other encyclopedias. It got that knowledge on its own by reading these natural language documents. The reason for that is we have much better information today about what's wrong with the world. If there's a battle in Fallujah, we're there, we experience it. If 30,000 people died in a battle in World War II, if you saw it at all, it was in a grainy newsreel in the movie theaters 3 weeks later. In World War I, there was no media. Maybe a few people read about it in the newspaper, and in the 19th century, there were no newspapers. It's not like the problems didn't exist. In fact, if you look at history, the world was much more violent. The 20th century seems pretty violent. There were 180 million people died, but in fact, your chance of dying violently in the 20th century is just 2-3%. It was about 20% in the 16th century. And even now, I have a graph showing an exponential decline in casualties in war. We get upset now at wars with a few thousand casualties, correctly so. 60 million people died in World War II. Education, there's been controversy for 200 years since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution about destroying jobs. And indeed, we are destroying jobs at the bottom of the skill ladder, adding new jobs at the top of the skill ladder. If I were a prescient futurist in 1900, I would say, okay, a third of you work on farms, and a third of you work in factories, but I predict in the year 2000, 100 years from now, that'll be 3% and 3%. And everybody will go, oh my God, we're going to be out of work. And I said, well, don't worry, you'll get jobs as web designers and designing new chips and new e-books, and nobody would know what I was talking about. In fact, the great significant majority of the jobs that exist today did not exist at all 50 years ago, let alone 100 years ago. We can't see the jobs that exist in the future. They can't even be described. We're going to run out of resources. We already have peak oil and so on. We will run out of resources only if we stick with the 19th century technologies we use today, like fossil fuels. We're actually awash in energy. We have 10,000 times more sunlight than we need to meet all of our energy needs. People say, well, you can't plug your refrigerator into the sun. That's true. We have to convert the sun into electricity, but the technologies to do that are on an exponential rise, which is to say the costs are coming down rapidly as we apply nanotechnology to solar panels, because we're 8 doublings away from meeting all of our energy needs. And I said, yes, we have 10,000 times more than we need. After we double 8 more times in 16 years total, we'll be using 1 part in 10,000 of the sunlight that hits the Earth. We could put efficient solar farms on a few % of the unused deserts in the world and meet all of our energy needs. And there's a similar story on water. There's actually lots of water all over the place. Only 2% of it is drinkable, but we know how to clean up the other 98%, particularly if we have inexpensive energy. There are new food technologies emerging where we can grow very high-quality food in vertical buildings. It's called vertical agriculture, and actually recycle all the nutrients so there's no negative effect on the environment, unlike the disastrous effect of factory farming today. This includes hydroponic-grown plants for fruits and vegetables, in vitro cloning of meat, basically cloning the muscle tissue of animals to create meat. This has been demonstrated. And PETA, the animal rights group, actually supports this. They don't mind people eating meat as long as it doesn't come from animals. And this could be done very inexpensively and with very high quality and be subject to the law of accelerating returns. So I'll leave you with one last trend, which I've already described, which is our longevity. This is the progression we've made before health and medicine was an information technology, when it was hit or miss, and it's now pushing 80. But this will go into high gear when we get to the mature phase of this biotechnology revolution, where we can really reprogram biology away from disease and aging processes. According to my models, we'll be adding more than a year every year to your remaining life expectancy in about 15 years. So you go forward a year, your life expectancy will move on away from you because of new ongoing developments. So if you can hang in there, we may get to see the remarkable century ahead. Thank you very much.